Hello everyone, thanks for coming to the talk. I apologize I am unable to be there in person. I hope that if you have any questions, my compatriot Ron will be able to answer them for you. And I am always happy to share any of my materials. So if you would like to see the survey, the slides themselves, anything I can provide that would be of use to you, please don't hesitate to ask. My name is Amanda Kinn. I am the Dean of Institutional Effectiveness at Jefferson State Community College, and the very last slide of this talk will have the contact information of everyone involved. So an overview of what we did, the Alabama Commission of Higher Education, AIC, and Jefferson State Community College got together. Dr. Purcell, Ron, Heather, and myself put our heads together and came up with a survey that looked at what OER was doing in the Southeast, how many people were using it, how much money were they saving, things of that nature. Dr. Purcell used his networking in order to distribute the survey to other higher education executives and administrators throughout the Southeast. We administered it and compiled all of the data late summer, early fall. So one of the largest driving forces for adopting open education resources at any institution is the cost savings. So started off with a bang. The results of our survey showed over $1 million of cost savings happening at the institutions who are using it across the Southeast. Now, how did we arrive at that number? One of the questions on the survey asked the administrators to tell us how many students were using OER at their institution and about what that average savings looked like. So when we added it all together, multiplied those two numbers, that's how we came to that $1.2 million. When we look at the states that responded to this survey throughout the Southeast, we can see that South Carolina and Alabama were our largest respondents. A little bit more striking than who did respond is kind of who didn't respond. So we see Georgia absent in this survey. And the reason for that, we only recently found out, is because Georgia was getting ready to administer its own open education resource survey to its administrators, so that when ours came through, they kind of put it on the back burner to avoid some survey fatigue. But we're really hoping that once they complete their survey and analyze their results, that they will share those results with us. The type of institutions that responded, overwhelmingly, the public 2- and 4-year institutions responded. We also did see a private school response, both profit and nonprofit. The largest response from the private schools actually came from South Carolina. About 2/3 of the private respondents were from that state. Very first simple question on the survey, do you use it, yes or no? So we're seeing about a little bit more than half of those respondents saying that yes, they had in fact adopted OER in at least one course at their institution. When we break down that yes answer into the type of institution, again, not surprising, we see that public 2- and 4-year colleges and universities are the much higher adopters. So for those that said yes, and people that answered yes had a lot more questions to answer than the no people. For those that answered yes, how long have they been using OER in their institution? And it broke down very interestingly to me. People were either brand new or old pros. So we have 40% at brand new at less than a year, and 40% 5 or more years. So just a much smaller fraction in the in-between population. So for the ones that use it, how did they come up with it? Did the resource come from scratch from their faculty? Did they use an existing resource, or a combination of both? And interestingly, combination of both. 90% of the institutions that use it, that was their response, with 10% saying that they strictly used an existing OER. Interestingly, none of the respondents said that they created their own OER from scratch. And I really think what we can take away from this is that when we're having those conversations with anybody that's hesitant because they're afraid that the workload means to implement OER, they have to absolutely come up with everything off the top of their head. is that we're not finding that. We're finding that most people are doing a combination of existing materials and incorporating their own materials. What courses did these YES institutions utilize OER? So we see about 10 Gen Ed courses, 13 science courses, and then also popping up in about 7 courses across agricultural and food science. Again, not surprising to me. I am a biologist by training, that there are 13 science courses using OER, simply because science changes rapidly. And one of the advantages of OER is to be able to include those rapid changes. We think that DNA replication has been the same for the last 20 years, and it just hasn't been. Every year they find a new enzyme or a new molecule involved in that process, and how great would it be to be able to give that to our students right away, instead of having to wait for the new edition, which it might not even be in, so then we're waiting 2 editions. So having to wait 3 to 5 years in order to introduce that to your students. Incentives to get faculty to use OER. 50% of respondents said that they use some kind of financial grant. 30% had no incentive at all, and 20% were other. So what were some of the other responses? An outside grant for the time required to develop and adopt materials, or some kind of combination of a financial grant or some other kind of compensation, maybe a course release or something of that nature. So these were an open-ended question for the survey participants to give examples of feedback that they received from faculty or students about open education resources. And here are some of the things that administrators said that they were hearing from faculty. And I'll kind of stick that in your mind. I'm going to come back to it again, that you have to remember that all of these responses are being filtered through the mind of an administrator. So administrators are hearing from faculty that the text was not very useful, that it's better to provide students with online resources, technologically advanced resources, kind of this recognition that the textbook is overpriced, and that frequently instructors provide a lot of the information themselves. We do see this third bullet point popping up, 300 and 400 or very specific, sometimes medical school or even career and technical have trouble finding a lot of existing OER, so that the workload has the potential to be more strenuous on that faculty member to develop it themselves. Again, customization, being able to assign readings that you use and ignore the readings that you don't use, having textbooks all be very similar to one another, and then of course that big advantage that all students, regardless of income, financial aid, any of the other statuses, would have access to the textbook right away, and that it would level the playing field on that first day. What are administrators hearing from students? Again, that the required text is not that useful, saving the money, hearing a lot of positive, especially for those 1 and 200 level courses. Overall, administrators are hearing positive things from students. Getting that cost savings, the stress of having to purchase it and going through that expense. Learning more in class saves so much time and money. And one of the things I will tell you from having been involved in this research for a couple of years now is that when we look at the effectiveness of the student's ability to learn from an open education resource versus a traditional textbook, like decades and decades of that research has been done. And every time it shows the same thing, that student learning outcomes are the same, if not better, in courses where open education resources were implemented successfully. So when we kind of think about, will the learning experience be as good for the students with an open education resource as with the traditional textbook, I encourage you to encourage your faculty, anybody in their area, go ahead and look for that course-specific, discipline-specific research, because it is out there. That research has been going on for a long time. The other thing that I really like and that I've come across in my research, particularly with developmental education, are some of these intangible factors. And one of the largest one is the student's perception of whether or not the faculty member who's standing in front of them thinks that they can succeed. And when you get these positive faculty members who are encouraging and the students believe that that instructor thinks they can succeed, they're more likely to succeed. So having that first day, here are all the resources you need, you don't have to worry about an expense or a purchase, is a great step up, a hand up for these students. Again, one of these schools that was in the less than 1 year implementation felt that it was too early, but for solid feedback, but we're having a very positive experience getting that good feedback from students by saving them that money and not asking them to expend all of their resources for textbooks. Okay, so these are the no's. So for the people that answered no, we said, well, you're not currently using it. Would you consider using it in the future? And we see an overwhelming yes response. So 72% of the people who aren't using it are very interested in using it. So it does kind of look to be a movement that's building, at least when we looked across the Southeast. Now this is a very interesting slide, and I'll bring back that point I said earlier about, remember, this is administrators talking about what they think the obstacles or challenges are in implementing OER. And you can see right at the top, they think faculty buy-in is the #1 problem. But when you speak to faculty, they will frequently say that administrative buy-in is the problem. So had we administered this directly to faculty, maybe we would have seen that first and that last answer switching place. And what that says to me is that when people leave here, when you leave this talk, make sure that conversations are happening from the top down and the bottom up. So be very sure that your faculty won't buy in, or be very sure that your administrator will or won't buy in by having those conversations instead of maybe some misperceptions that are out there. Faculty buy-in in the second citation here, no faculty resources, may be tied together. So that is one thing that we consistently hear from faculty when talking about OER, is that they don't have any of the resources that come from some of the larger publishers, including homework assignments, question banks, test banks, practice problems, videos, pictures, canned lectures, all of these kinds of things that some faculty use very heavily may or may not always be available with OER. No knowledge of what OER is, so that's something that we're hoping to kind of remedy even with these ongoing talks that we're having. Concerns from the current bookstore. Some colleges and universities do get a large income coming from their bookstore, so that's something to consider. Lack of structure and consistency comes up quite frequently. How can you be sure that it will stay the same over time? Is it like Wikipedia and anybody can edit it? Is it quality? Is it peer reviewed? These kinds of things, which are rapidly being addressed, I think, in very encouraging and very positive ways. Other obstacles. So they could choose the option other things and then fill in an answer. So lack of support for faculty release time. So again, we're kind of hearing from faculty that they do believe a lot of the burden will fall on them to figure it all out, to make all the materials, and how are they going to be compensated? How will it affect tenure and promotion processes? There are some faculty members, especially anybody holding a specialized PhD, where they can contribute their knowledge to a textbook and kind of have that extra income, ancillary income. And also materials that we talked about on the last slide coming from that third party, that publisher that they are used to having. Some other things: not enough information available, no ongoing discussions. Faculty who have become early adopters are pushing for more development opportunities. There's some knowledge and great interest, but no one really knows how to get started. We see these kind of things, entrenched teaching methods coming up again and again. Some other issues, that ancillary income that some professors may get from contributing their specific knowledge to a textbook, editing a textbook, reviewing a textbook. Student preference. There may be students out there who still like to read a book. Internet access is definitely a limitation, especially when you get out to some of the more rural areas in Alabama. There are technological limitations also with some faculty. This is a big one, the initial pilot trial not being positive. So you hate having that first bad experience and then asking somebody to kind of go back and do it again. And again, there's that last point, this perception among faculty that the administrators wouldn't support. And then we saw from the other slide that kind of administrators think that faculty are not going to support. So we definitely have to make sure we're having those conversations from the top down and from the bottom up. So what can state coordinating boards, system offices, anything like that, what can the higher organizations do in order to help foster the use of open education resource? So the number one thing is just kind of help identify the resources themselves, the quality resources. So the ones that are out there that are being used, the websites, online and in-person seminar series on best practices, statewide instructional meetings by subject. So I'm a biologist, and no liberal arts person wants me coming in telling them how to use OER because I'm a biologist. So this push for kind of subject-specific OER organizations was cited very highly here. One thing that I love is that the cost of it was actually at the bottom. So we did suggest instituting some kind of a fee, maybe calling it a library fee, to support the OER initiative was at the bottom. And again, remember, this is administrators, and that's the number one thing that administrators like to throw up is the cost of it. And we're finding with OER that cost is kind of at the bottom of the list of concerns. So to kind of summarize what we found, we know that the literature says that OER, when it's implemented well, the student learning outcomes are the same, if not better, as with traditional textbooks, but that we do recognize this large need for professional development. We saw that OER is being used in about half the campuses surveyed. And again, we saw that the ones that aren't using it are very interested in using it. More likely to be used at public institutions, and that's the more likely place to run into those students that have a greater financial need. And that we got that $1.2 million number at the beginning of the talk due to the fact that students are saving about $190 per course where OER is being implemented. We saw the wide range of course, a lot of gen ed, very popular in the 100, 200 level courses, very popular in the science courses. There is a lack of overall awareness of what OER is, what the good resources are for it, how to start it, how to support it, professional development opportunities, a need for the administrative support of OER resource development, whether they're reaching out to faculty with just knowledge, information, money, time. These things need to come down from administration, and that state and coordinating governing boards can be a place at least for the knowledge and resource repository. So recommendations based on the findings from these surveys: always continue to respect academic freedom. No one is ever suggesting that you go into a classroom and you tell anybody how they should teach their class. AIC's position is that OER implementation is encouraged but not required, and that falls right into that academic freedom. No one is saying anyone has to do this. Continue to investigate existing and potential uses of OER right here in Alabama, seeking speaking opportunities like this one to introduce it to faculty, administrators, any other stakeholders, get those conversations going. and providing a series of workshops across the state in 2018. We've done 3 so far. To me, this kind of feels like a 3.5, maybe a 4. Getting money. While OER is free to students in many of the implementation models, that doesn't always mean that it's free to the colleges and universities that use it, and that there is some consideration to be given for needing a framework to support the database. There are some subscription-based services that require a fee, and possibly even personnel to help manage that. So there is an effort going forth to seek seed money from the legislator, and also federal and foundation education grants to help kind of get this off the ground, get it implemented, and sustain it. Enhance the clearinghouse, the repository at AIC, making that perhaps a place where we can start to put these resources, or at least guidance for these resources and for this knowledge if colleges are interested in implementing it. And identify other alternatives to print textbooks and other educational resources. I have been very fortunate to attend all 3 workshops, and I learned something new at every single workshop that we held. One of the most interesting things that I remember came from Louisiana, where their librarians were finding resources that they could get, textbooks that they could get a license that allowed them unlimited simultaneous users forever. So there was no user limit and there was no time limit, but they were having to pay anywhere from $50 up to about $1,500 to secure these resources. But once they had them, they could distribute it to their entire university. So that was one of these alternatives that I was amazed to see. Some of the other alternatives that are coming out right now are the publishers are all starting to respond to the movement for open education resources. We saw Cengage trying to offer for $200 access to their entire catalog for 2 years. Instead of trying to get students these codes by textbook, they were just opening up their entire catalog. And we're also seeing some different licensing offers from the publishing houses. So they are definitely, hopefully that publishing bubble is popping and they are starting to respond differently than they have in the past. So some concluding thoughts. Textbooks are rising. The inflation of textbook costs is amazing, and open education resources is a potential solution to that. I've said it 3 or 4 times. I'll say it again. When you're implementing, when you're even having these conversations, make sure that they are going from the top down and the bottom up, and that any implementation strategy is going to benefit from related professional development. A lot of the conversations around open education resources have to do with licensing. And one thing that I learned by attending these workshops is that frequently it's the librarians who have the greatest knowledge about the licensing and the flexibility that can sometimes be suggested in licensing. So they are a great person to have at the table when you're thinking about OER and implementing OER, and they may be able to help negotiate or come up with some alternatives to the things that you're looking at. So, and finally, this is a slide that I keep in when I give this talk to other IE professionals, but I kind of like it for everybody. I think it's a good message. What you saw here was polished and smooth, and it's the final draft. But that doesn't mean that it didn't start off rough. And rough drafts are supposed to be rough. And trying something new and implementing new is supposed to be hard. And even having the conversations can sometimes even be uncomfortable. But I encourage you all to explore the topic, have the conversations, pilot it, even if it's in a small, statistically insignificant class, and that's coming from an IE person who worries about statistical significance constantly. It all has value. So even if you can only get one person with a class of 12, that's a way to start the movement on your campus. So thank you so much for listening to this talk. Here is the contact information of everyone who was involved in getting this survey together. And again, I am always willing to share any resources, any materials I have that can be of any use. And if there are any questions that Ron is unable to answer, I'm sure he will get those to me and I will get you an answer. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your day.